Hey, everybody. Welcome to our final session of our Caregiver Training and Support Seminars funded by a grant from the Hussman Foundation. Today, our guest speaker is Bridgette Hamstead with Fish in a Tree NOLA. I probably should have gotten bios for everyone, but I did not. So you are welcome to introduce yourself because you know you more than anyone knows you. Thank you, everybody. Just a quick little housekeeping note. If you have signed on Zoom, please be sure you put the names of everyone who is attending with you in the chat so we can get an accurate head count of the attendees today. Thanks, and I hope everybody enjoys the presentation.
Hello, thank you, Claire. I will introduce myself when I'm speaking and getting into introductions. I am a neurodiversity professional, live here in New Orleans, and our organization Fish in a Tree is based in New Orleans, but it is a virtual community center for neurodivergent people. I'm the activist of the year for New Orleans, and also I am the U.S. representative to the United Nations for autism awareness. So I'm very happy to be here, and I will move into my presentation. I'm honored to join you as part of the Autism Society of Greater New Orleans Caregiver Training and Support Seminar Series. My name again is Bridgette Hamstead, and I'm a neurodiversity consultant, educator, and advocate with a passion for celebrating and supporting neurodivergent individuals. As someone who identifies as ADHD, which means both autistic and ADHD, and as a parent of neurodivergent children, my personal and professional journeys are deeply intertwined. These experiences have given me firsthand insight into the challenges of navigating a world often designed for neurotypical people, but also into the immense resilience, strength, and creativity within the neurodivergent community. I'm also the founder and executive director of Fish in a Tree, a virtual neurodiversity community center and consulting firm dedicated to creating spaces where neurodivergent individuals are supported, celebrated, and empowered. Fish in a Tree provides tailored programming for people of all ages and backgrounds, from sensory-friendly story times and arts programming to consulting services that help organizations implement authentic neuro-inclusive practices. At our core, we believe in the power of community and the idea that inclusion is not just a box to check, it's a way to enrich every space we inhabit. Today's presentation, Building Inclusive Communities, focuses on a topic that is central to my mission. Together, we'll explore how systemic barriers impact autistic individuals and how we, as caregivers, advocates, and allies, can take intentional steps to reduce those barriers. I'll share insights into the systemic challenges that autistic people face in various environments, such as schools, workplaces, and community spaces, and provide actionable steps to create more accessible, inclusive, and supportive spaces. This work is deeply personal for me, and I know it is for many of you. I'm grateful to the Autism Society of Greater New Orleans for hosting this seminar series and for their dedication to supporting caregivers and empowering families. By being here today, you are already contributing to the movement toward a more inclusive and equitable world. My hope is that you leave this session not only with a deeper understanding of the barriers we need to disassemble, but also with the inspiration and tools to take action into your own circles. And so we'll just move right into it. Um, so we'll be talking about kind of setting the stage and understanding systemic barriers as a whole. To build truly inclusive communities, we must first understand that systemic barriers that autistic individuals face. Systemic barriers are institutional, social, and cultural structures that often unintentionally create environments where autistic people are excluded or disadvantaged. These barriers are deeply ingrained in our systems, from family dynamics to schools, healthcare, workplaces, and broader community spaces. Unlike overt discrimination, systemic barriers are often invisible to those who don't experience them directly, making it even more crucial to identify and address them. In family settings, systemic barriers may manifest as a lack of understanding or validation of autistic experiences. Traditional family norms often prioritize conformity and sameness, unintentionally sidelining autistic individuals whose needs and ways of interacting with the world may differ. Parents and siblings, though well-meaning, may struggle to adapt to these differences, leading to misunderstandings and a sense of isolation for the autistic family member. In education, systemic barriers are particularly pronounced. Schools are often designed to reward compliance and uniformity, leaving little room for neurodivergent learning styles. Standardized curriculums, rigid classroom structures, and insufficient teacher training on neurodiversity can make schools inaccessible and unwelcoming for autistic students. For example, a child who struggles with sensory overload in a noisy classroom or who processes information differently may be labeled as disruptive or unmotivated, rather than supported in ways that allow them to thrive. Healthcare presents another significant challenge. Autistic individuals frequently encounter healthcare providers who lack training in understanding autism. Sensory unfriendly environments, such as bright lights and noisy waiting rooms, can make accessing care overwhelming. Furthermore, healthcare systems often fail to accommodate communication differences, leading to misdiagnosis or unmet medical needs. This lack of accessibility not only affects physical health, but also contributes to significant mental health disparities as well. In the workplace, systemic barriers are perpetuated by hiring practices and workplace cultures that prioritize traditional notions of professionalism, such as eye contact, verbal fluency, or rigid adherence to schedules. These norms can exclude autistic people who excel in their work but may approach tasks or interactions differently. Many workplaces are also slow to implement meaningful accommodations or create environments where neurodiversity is seen as an asset rather than a challenge. Community spaces, including churches, recreational facilities, and social groups, often unintentionally exclude autistic people by failing to consider sensory and accessibility needs. Loud events, lack of alternative communication options, and rigid social expectations can create environments where autistic people and their families feel unwelcome. The impact of these systemic barriers is profound. For many autistic individuals, these barriers lead to chronic exclusion and missed opportunities. The stress of navigating systems that are not designed for them can contribute to heightened mental health challenges such as anxiety, depression, and burnout. These barriers also create a ripple effect, impacting caregivers and families who often find themselves isolated as they struggle to advocate for change. Moreover, systemic barriers do not affect all autistic people equally. Intersectionality, the overlapping of different marginalized identities, can amplify these challenges. For example, autistic people of color may face both racism and ableism, compounding their exclusion from vital systems. Autistic women and non-binary individuals are often misdiagnosed or undiagnosed due to gendered biases in diagnostic criteria, delaying access to support. People from low-income backgrounds may lack the financial resources to access therapies or accommodations, further entrenching systemic inequalities. Understanding these barriers is the first step toward dismantling them. By acknowledging the ways our systems perpetuate exclusion, we can begin to imagine and create environments that are inclusive, equitable, and affirming of autistic people and their unique contributions. As we move forward in this presentation, we will explore practical ways to address these barriers and build a world that truly welcomes and celebrates neurodiversity. So after defining systemic barriers, we'll move into what we can do in our own communities to address systemic barriers. To create inclusive communities, we must first challenge the assumptions and stereotypes that shape the way society views autism. For decades, public understanding of autism has been shaped by deficit-based narratives that emphasize what autistic individuals lack rather than recognizing their inherent strengths and diversity. Dispelling these myths is crucial as they create barriers not only in how autistic people are treated, but also in how they view themselves. One pervasive myth is the use of functioning labels, such as categorizing individuals as high functioning or low functioning. These labels oversimplify the complex and dynamic nature of autism. Functioning labels reduce individuals to a binary that ignores context. Someone who is high functioning in one environment may struggle significantly in another. These labels also carry value judgments that can diminish the experiences of those deemed low functioning, denying them agency and respect. Similarly, stereotypes about emotional capacity perpetuate the harmful myth that autistic people lack empathy. In reality, autistic people often experience emotions deeply, though they may express or process them differently. This misunderstanding creates unnecessary emotional distance and fosters exclusion. Deficit-based narratives compound these challenges. From a young age, many autistic people are subjected to interventions and education systems that focus on fixing or normalizing them. These narratives reinforce the idea that autistic traits are inherently negative, which undermines self-esteem and discourages authentic self-expression. For example, discouraging stimming, an essential coping and communication mechanism for many autistic people, sends a message that their natural behaviors are unacceptable. Such narratives teach society to view autism as a problem to solve rather than as a natural variation of human experience. To counter these harmful perspectives, we need to embrace the strengths-based approach. Rather than focusing on deficits, this approach highlights the unique contributions that autistic individuals bring to families, communities, and workplaces. Autistic people are often deeply passionate, creative, and detail-oriented. Many possess exceptional problem-solving abilities and unique ways of viewing the world that lead to innovative solutions. For example, fields like technology, art, and advocacy are rich with contributions from autistic people whose strengths shine when given the opportunity. Celebrating these strengths does not mean ignoring challenges. It means approaching them with understanding and commitment to support rather than change. Diversity itself is an asset in all settings, and neurodiversity is no exception. Just as biodiversity strengthens ecosystems, neurodiversity enriches human communities by introducing a broader range of perspectives, skills, and problem-solving approaches. Schools and workplaces that embrace neurodiversity are often more adaptable, inclusive, and innovative. Recognizing the value of autistic individuals means not only accepting differences, but actively seeking to understand and incorporate them into our systems. Another essential part of shifting perspectives is recognizing ableism, the systemic discrimination and prejudice against disabled people, including autistic individuals. Ableism is often subtle, appearing in attitudes, language, and societal structures that prioritize neurotypical ways of thinking and behaving. For example, ableism can manifest in workplaces that demand eye contact during interviews, in schools that penalize alternative learning styles, or in social norms that pathologize behaviors like avoiding small talk. These practices reinforce the idea that neurotypical standards are superior and that autistic individuals must conform to be accepted. Ableism perpetuates exclusion by creating environments that are inaccessible or unwelcoming. For instance, sensory overload in public spaces can make it difficult for autistic people to participate in daily activities, while rigid expectations for communication can exclude those of us who use alternative methods like AAC. Ableism is often internalized by caregivers, educators, and even autistic people themselves, leading to feelings of inadequacy and a reluctance to advocate for change. To dismantle ableism, we must actively challenge these norms and attitudes. This begins with self-awareness, examining our own biases and understanding how ableism has shaped our perceptions. It also requires systemic action, such as advocating for inclusive policies and practices in schools, workplaces, and community spaces. Importantly, challenging ableism means centering autistic voices in conversations about inclusion and recognizing them as the ultimate authorities on their own experiences. By breaking stereotypes, adopting a strengths-based approach, and addressing ableism, we can shift perspectives in ways that promote acceptance, understanding, and inclusion. This is not just about improving individual experiences, but about transforming the systems and cultures that shape our world. When we challenge assumptions, we make room for autistic people to be seen, valued, and celebrated for who they truly are. Creating inclusive environments begins at home. Families are often the first and most influential environments in which autistic people navigate the world, making it crucial to build spaces that affirm their identity and provide support. However, several barriers can hinder inclusion within families, even with the best intentions. A lack of understanding about autism, adherence to rigid routines, and exclusion from decision-making processes are common challenges that must be addressed. By making intentional changes, families can foster a more inclusive, supportive, and empowering atmosphere. One major barrier is a lack of understanding about the diverse ways autism can manifest. Many families, especially those newly navigating an autism diagnosis, may unintentionally impose neurotypical expectations on their autistic family member. This can lead to frustration, misunderstandings, and feelings of inadequacy for the autistic person. For example, a family might expect a child to participate in loud or chaotic family gatherings without recognizing how overwhelming such environments can be. These expectations often stem from a desire for the child to fit in or avoid standing out, but can inadvertently convey the awful, wrong message that their natural ways of being are wrong. Rigid routines can also create barriers. While predictability and structure are beneficial for many autistic people, overly rigid family routines that do not accommodate their needs or preferences can feel restrictive. For example, insisting on traditional family meal times without considering sensory sensitivities to food textures or smells may exclude the autistic family member from fully participating. This rigidity can stifle the flexibility needed to adapt to and embrace neurodivergent ways of engaging with the world. Exclusion from decision-making processes within the family is another significant barrier. Autistic people, particularly children, are often excluded from choices that affect them, whether it's planning daily routines, choosing family activities, or expressing their preferences. This exclusion can unintentionally undermine their autonomy and reinforce feelings of being an outsider within their own family. To overcome these barriers, families can take steps to create a neuro-affirming home environment that values and celebrates differences. Validating an autistic family member's unique experiences and needs is a foundational step. This involves actively listening to how they perceive and interact with the world without judgment or an agenda to change them. For instance, if a family member expresses a need for quiet time after school or work, honoring that need rather than pushing them into immediate interaction can demonstrate respect for their boundaries. Including autistic family members in household decisions is another powerful way to foster inclusion. This can be done using accessible communication methods that suit their preferences. For example, if verbal communication is challenging, families can incorporate visual aids, written options, or technology-assisted tools to facilitate discussions. Simple practices like offering choices for family activities or allowing input on meal planning can make a significant difference in building a sense of belonging and agency. These small acts of inclusion send a powerful message: their voice matters. Educating extended family members about neurodivergence is also critical. Family gatherings, while often joyful, can be overwhelming for autistic people if their needs are not understood or accommodated. Educating extended relatives on sensory sensitivities, communication differences, or the importance of providing downtime during events can help foster a more inclusive environment. For example, letting relatives know that it's okay if someone steps away from a noisy celebration or uses noise-canceling headphones can prevent misunderstandings and create a more welcoming atmosphere. This education can be facilitated through direct conversations, sharing resources, or even enlisting the help of a neurodivergent advocate to speak with the family. By addressing these barriers and implementing solutions, families can become powerful advocates for inclusion. A neuro-affirming home does not just benefit the autistic family member, it creates a culture of understanding, empathy, and collaboration that strengthens the entire family unit. These foundational changes ripple outward, setting the stage for more inclusive practices in other environments, from schools to workplaces and beyond. Families who embrace these steps become role models for the broader community, demonstrating how inclusion can begin with intentional, compassionate actions at home. Families play a critical role in shaping how autistic people experience education. Schools are a central part of most children's lives, and they should be spaces where every student feels safe, supported, and valued. However, many schools are not designed with neurodiversity in mind, which creates significant barriers for autistic students. Conformity-focused education, inaccessible curriculums, and a lack of teacher training on autism are among the most pressing issues. By addressing these challenges, caregivers can help create educational environments that honor the unique needs and strengths of autistic learners. One of the biggest barriers in schools is the emphasis on conformity. Traditional education systems often prioritize compliance, such as sitting still for long periods, following rigid schedules, or adhering to standardized behavioral expectations. These norms can be particularly challenging for autistic students whose natural ways of engaging with the world may not align with neurotypical standards. For instance, a child who needs to stim, which means engage in repetitive movements or sounds, to self-regulate, might be reprimanded for disruptive behavior, even though stimming helps them focus and feel comfortable. The pressure to conform can create unnecessary stress and may discourage autistic students from fully participating in their education. Inaccessible curriculums further exacerbate these challenges. Teaching methods often rely heavily on verbal instruction, group work, and fast-paced transitions, leaving little room for alternative learning styles. Autistic students who excel with visual aids, hands-on activities, or individualized instruction may struggle to keep up in such environments. Additionally, schools frequently overlook sensory needs, with classrooms that are loud, brightly lit, or cluttered, making it difficult for students to focus and thrive. These environmental factors can turn schools into places of discomfort rather than learning. The lack of teacher training on autism is another critical issue. Many educators are well-intentioned, but lack the knowledge and tools to effectively support autistic students. Without understanding the diverse ways autism manifests, teachers may misinterpret behaviors or fail to provide necessary accommodations. This can lead to disciplinary actions for behaviors rooted in sensory overwhelm or communication challenges, further alienating autistic students from their peers and the learning process. To address these barriers, caregivers can play a pivotal role in advocating for more inclusive practices in schools. One powerful step is to push for flexible classroom policies that embrace different learning styles. This might involve advocating for alternative seating arrangements, such as standing desks or sensory-friendly corners, where students can work comfortably. Caregivers can also encourage schools to adopt universal design principles in their teaching methods, ensuring that lesson plans are accessible to a wide range of learners. For instance, a lesson could include visual aids, written instructions, and hands-on activities to support students with diverse needs. Caregivers can also work directly with educators to integrate sensory supports and alternative communication methods into the classroom. Sensory supports might include noise-canceling headphones, fidget tools, or adjustable lighting to create a more comfortable environment. For students who use alternative communication methods, such as augmentative and alternative communication devices, caregivers can collaborate with teachers to ensure these tools are understood and respected. Providing these supports not only benefits autistic students, but also creates a more inclusive classroom environment for all learners. Promoting autistic-led teacher training programs is another transformative step. Caregivers can advocate for professional development opportunities where educators learn directly from autistic people about their experiences and needs. These programs provide invaluable insights, challenging stereotypes, and equipping teachers with practical strategies to foster inclusion. By centering autistic voices in training, schools can build a culture of respect and understanding that benefits the entire student body. Through these actions, caregivers can help transform schools into spaces where autistic students are empowered to succeed on their own terms. By challenging conformity-focused practices, addressing sensory and communication needs, and advocating for better teacher training, caregivers pave the way for a more inclusive educational system. These changes not only improve outcomes for autistic students, but also create a ripple effect, inspiring educators, administrators, and peers to embrace the value of neurodiversity in their communities. Workplaces are essential environments for personal fulfillment, financial independence, and community connection, yet they often remain inaccessible to autistic people. Systemic barriers such as rigid work schedules, lack of accommodations, and hiring biases prevent many neurodivergent people from thriving professionally. These challenges are deeply ingrained in workplace cultures and hiring practices, perpetuating exclusion. However, caregivers can play a crucial role in advocating for more inclusive practices and empowering autistic people to navigate and succeed in professional settings. One significant barrier is the prevalence of rigid work schedules and structures. Many workplaces operate under traditional models that prioritize fixed hours, in-person attendance, and narrowly defined productivity standards. These structures can pose significant challenges for autistic employees who may have varying energy levels, sensory sensitivities, or different ways of organizing their work. For instance, a workplace that mandates daily meetings in a noisy open plan office may unintentionally exclude someone who finds such environments overwhelming or distracting. Similarly, rigid schedules may fail to account for an autistic individual's need for breaks to self-regulate or manage sensory overload. The lack of accommodations further compounds this issue. While laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations, many autistic employees face resistance or stigma when requesting them. Common accommodations such as noise-canceling headphones, flexible deadlines, or remote work options are often misunderstood or dismissed by employers who prioritize traditional norms over individual needs. This lack of understanding creates a hostile environment where autistic employees may feel unsupported or pressured to mask their needs, leading to burnout or disengagement. Hiring biases represent another critical barrier. Recruitment processes often favor neurotypical candidates by emphasizing social behaviors like eye contact, small talk, or a specific style of self-promotion during interviews. These biases overlook the unique strengths that autistic people bring to the workplace, such as innovative problem solving, attention to detail, and deep focus. Consequently, many qualified autistic candidates are excluded from opportunities before they even have a chance to showcase their abilities. To address these barriers, caregivers can advocate for workplaces to adopt flexible working environments and remote work options. Flexibility is a cornerstone of inclusion, as it allows employees to structure their work in ways that align with their strengths and needs. For instance, remote work can provide a sensory-friendly alternative to bustling office spaces, while flexible hours enable employees to work during their most productive times. Caregivers can also encourage employers to consider job sharing arrangements or task-based roles that focus on outcomes rather than rigid schedules, creating opportunities for neurodivergent people to excel on their terms. Educating employers about neurodiversity is another essential step. Many hiring managers and team leaders lack awareness of how neurodivergent people can contribute to their organizations. Caregivers can advocate for workshops or training sessions that highlight the benefits of inclusive hiring practices, such as increased creativity, innovation, and employee retention. Sharing success stories of autistic professionals who have positively impacted their workplaces can help challenge misconceptions and build momentum for cultural change. Additionally, mentorship and peer support programs can play a transformative role in fostering workplace inclusion. These programs pair neurodivergent employees with mentors or allies who provide guidance, advocacy, and a sense of belonging. Mentorship helps autistic people navigate workplace dynamics, build confidence, and identify pathways for career growth. Peer support networks also create a safe space for sharing experiences and exchanging strategies for success. Caregivers can encourage employers to establish these programs, emphasizing how they benefit both neurodivergent employees and the organization as a whole. By advocating for these changes, Caregivers can help create workplaces that embrace diversity and empower autistic people to thrive professionally. Flexible environments, informed employers, and supportive networks not only enhance inclusion, but also unlock the immense potential that neurodivergent employees bring to the table. These steps are not just about meeting legal requirements. They represent a fundamental shift towards valuing individuals for their unique contributions and creating workplaces that reflect the rich diversity of our communities. Churches and community spaces play a significant role in fostering connection, belonging, and support. For many families, these spaces provide not just spiritual fulfillment, but also social networks and a sense of shared purpose. However, autistic people often encounter barriers in these settings that make participation challenging or even impossible. Overlooked sensory needs, rigid social structures, and exclusionary attitudes are common obstacles that alienate autistic people and their families. By addressing these barriers, caregivers can help create faith communities and public spaces that are truly inclusive and welcoming for all. One of the most significant barriers is the failure to account for sensory needs. Many worship services and community events are not designed with sensory accessibility in mind. Bright lights, loud music, large crowds, and unpredictable transitions can overwhelm autistic people, making it difficult for them to feel comfortable or safe. For example, a church service with amplified music and lengthy sermons may unintentionally exclude someone who struggles with auditory sensitivities or requires frequent movement breaks to stay regulated. Similarly, community gatherings like fairs or town meetings may not provide quiet spaces where individuals can retreat if they feel overstimulated. This lack of consideration sends the message that these spaces are not meant for everyone, leaving autistic people and their families feeling isolated. Rigid social structures present another barrier. Many churches and community organizations operate with traditions or norms that prioritize conformity and discourage deviation from expected behaviors. This can create challenges for autistic people whose communication styles, body language, or social engagement differ from neurotypical norms. For instance, a faith community might expect attendees to engage in eye contact during greetings or participate in communal prayers in a specific way, inadvertently excluding those who process or express themselves differently. These structures often leave little room for individuality, making it difficult for autistic people to feel fully included or valued. Exclusionary attitudes can further compound these challenges. In some cases, misconceptions about autism or a lack of awareness about neurodivergence lead to judgment or dismissal. For example, an autistic child who struggles to sit quietly during a sermon might be labeled as disruptive, or an adult who avoids social interactions after service might be perceived as unfriendly. These attitudes create an unwelcoming environment, reinforcing the notion that autistic people must change or mask their differences to participate. To address these barriers, caregivers can advocate for sensory-friendly worship services and community events. Sensory-friendly services might include dimmer lighting, reduced volume during music or speaking segments, and clear, predictable schedules to help attendees anticipate transitions. Providing quiet areas or sensory rooms within the building can offer individuals a safe space to decompress if they become overwhelmed. These adjustments not only accommodate autistic people, but create a more welcoming environment for people with sensory sensitivities, anxiety, or other disabilities. Another powerful way to foster inclusion is to involve autistic people in leadership or planning roles within churches and community organizations. When autistic people have a voice in shaping policies, events, or services, their insights can help ensure that these spaces meet a wider range of needs. For example, an autistic person might suggest changes to seating arrangements, communication methods, or the timing of events to make them more accessible. By placing autistic people in leadership positions, organizations demonstrate a commitment to inclusion that goes beyond service level adjustments. Fostering open discussions about inclusion within faith communities and community spaces is also essential. Many people lack awareness of the barriers faced by autistic people and may not know how to support them. Hosting workshops, discussion groups, or guest speakers to educate members about neurodiversity can build understanding and empathy. Caregivers can also encourage leaders to preach or speak about the value of diversity, using faith-based teachings or community principles to emphasize the importance of inclusion. These discussions can challenge stereotypes, dispel misconceptions, and create a culture of acceptance. By addressing sensory needs, promoting autistic leadership, and fostering open conversations about inclusion, caregivers can help transform churches and community spaces into environments where autistic people feel valued and supported. These changes are not only beneficial for autistic people, but also enrich the entire community by creating spaces that reflect the principles of compassion, equity, and belonging. When churches and community organizations embrace neurodiversity, they become models of inclusion that inspire broader societal change. Creating truly inclusive environments requires a strong foundation of community support, and caregivers are at the heart of that effort. Caregivers of autistic people often take on dual roles as both advocates for systemic change and allies in their loved ones' day-to-day lives. While this work is deeply rewarding, it also demands significant emotional, physical, and mental energy. Building a community of support is essential, not just for the autistic person, but also for caregivers themselves, who need resources and allies to sustain their advocacy efforts and maintain their well-being. Caregivers play a crucial role as advocates and allies for autistic people, whether they are parents, siblings, or close friends. Caregivers often act as bridges between the autistic person and a world that may not yet understand or accommodate their needs. This means advocating in schools, workplaces, healthcare settings, and community spaces to ensure the autistic person is included and supported. Caregivers are uniquely positioned to amplify the voices of autistic people, using their insight and access to influence systems and people who might otherwise be resistant to change. However, this advocacy work can be exhausting, and many caregivers face burnout from juggling the demands of supporting their loved ones while navigating systemic barriers. Self-care is not a luxury, but a necessity for caregivers to sustain their advocacy efforts. Strategies for preventing burnout include setting boundaries, seeking respite care when possible, and connecting with other caregivers for mutual support. It's also essential to carve out time for personal interest and relaxation, recognizing that a caregiver's well-being directly impacts their ability to support others effectively. No caregiver can or should do this work alone. Building a circle of support is a vital step in creating an environment where both the caregiver and the autistic individual feel supported. This circle includes family, friends, professionals, and community members who share a commitment to inclusion and empowerment. Engaging these allies can help caregivers distribute responsibilities, gain new perspectives, and access a broader range of resources. For example, involving trusted friends in advocacy efforts or enlisting extended family members to assist with daily tasks can ease the caregiver's burden while reinforcing a network of care. In addition to personal networks, connecting with local and national neurodiversity organizations provides caregivers with valuable tools and community. Organizations like the Autism Self-Advocacy Network and local neurodiversity groups offer workshops, online forums, and in-person events where caregivers can learn and share experiences and also find solidarity. These organizations often highlight autistic voices, helping caregivers stay informed about best practices and emerging issues within the neurodiversity movement. Participating in these networks empowers caregivers with knowledge and a sense of belonging, reinforcing their role as allies and advocates. One of the most impactful ways to build a community of support is through collaborative advocacy. Partnering with autistic people to co-create solutions ensures that efforts are aligned with their actual needs and experiences rather than assumptions. This collaboration can take many forms, from consulting autistic adults on how to improve sensory environments to involving autistic youth in decisions about their education. By centering autistic voices, caregivers not only amplify their loved one's agency, but also help dismantle stereotypes about autism. Collaborative advocacy extends beyond individual interactions to systemic efforts. Caregivers can work with their communities to provide policies that support accessibility and inclusion in schools, workplaces, and public spaces. For example, advocating for sensory-friendly public events, universal design in classrooms, or workplace accommodations can create lasting change that benefits not only autistic people, but also a wide range of community members. Joining forces with other caregivers, neurodivergent people, and allies strengthens these efforts, demonstrating the collective power of a unified voice. Building a community of support is not just about meeting immediate needs. It's about creating a sustainable foundation for long-term inclusion and empowerment. Empowering caregivers, fostering strong support networks, and embracing collaborative advocacy are all critical components of this effort. When caregivers prioritize their well-being, enlist allies, and work alongside autistic people, they help create a ripple effect of inclusion that transforms families, communities, and broader societal system. This work not only uplifts autistic people, but also builds stronger, more compassionate communities for everyone. Advocacy is a powerful tool for creating systemic change, and it often begins with small, everyday actions. These seemingly simple steps, when consistently applied, can challenge exclusionary practices and spark broader transformation. For caregivers, advocacy is not only about securing accommodations or resources for their loved ones. It's about shaping a world where inclusion becomes the norm rather than the exception. By taking intentional steps and amplifying the voices of autistic people, caregivers can contribute to a ripple effect of change that impacts schools, workplaces, and communities. Systemic change can feel overwhelming, but it's important to remember that small actions can have a profound impact. Every day, advocacy starts with speaking up in moments where exclusion or misunderstanding occurs. For example, A caregiver might gently correct a teacher who misinterprets an autistic child's behavior as defiance, or advocate for sensory-friendly seating at a community event. These conversations, while challenging, plant the seeds of awareness and help others recognize the importance of inclusion. Educating others is another critical component of advocacy. Caregivers can use their lived experiences to share insights about autism and neurodiversity with family members, friends, and colleagues. This might involve explaining why an autistic person avoids eye contact, needs time to process information, or requires accommodations to thrive. These small but meaningful conversations help dismantle stereotypes and create allies who can join in advocating for change. Micro changes within personal circles often ripple outward to influence larger systems. For instance, a caregiver who works with their child's teacher to implement a sensory-friendly classroom might inspire the school to adopt similar practices for other students. Similarly, a workplace that accommodates one autistic employee may begin to recognize the value of broader neurodiversity initiatives. These incremental changes, driven by caregivers' persistence and commitment, are the foundation of systemic transformation. The power of advocacy is best illustrated through stories of successful inclusion efforts. In schools, caregivers have championed changes like introducing flexible seating options, incorporating visual schedules, and training educators on neurodiversity. These changes not only improve the learning environment for autistic students, but also benefit their neurotypical peers by fostering a culture of understanding and collaboration. For example, one school district implemented sensory-friendly spaces after a caregiver advocated for their child, ultimately creating a model that was adopted by neighboring schools. In workplaces, advocacy has led to groundbreaking initiatives such as mentorship programs for neurodivergent employees and hiring practices that prioritize skills over traditional interview performance. One caregiver shared how they collaborated with their employer to create a quiet workspace for an autistic colleague, which led to broader discussions about workplace inclusion and inspired the company to adopt permanent accommodations for all employees. Communities, too, have been transformed by caregiver-driven advocacy. Local events such as fairs or faith-based gatherings have become more accessible through the efforts of caregivers who champion sensory-friendly hours, quiet spaces, and alternative communication options. These initiatives often begin with one person's persistence, but grow into community-wide efforts that change how inclusion is understood and practiced. Central to all these successes is the role of caregivers in amplifying autistic voices. Effective advocacy centers the experiences and perspective of autistic people, ensuring that their needs and desires guide the solutions. Caregivers can empower autistic people by encouraging self-advocacy, sharing their stories, and involving them in decision-making processes. For example, a caregiver might collaborate with their autistic loved one to design a presentation on neurodiversity for a local community group, allowing them to take the lead in shaping the narrative. By engaging in everyday advocacy, championing micro changes, and amplifying autistic voices, caregivers can drive systemic change that benefits everyone. These actions may seem small at first, but their cumulative effects can reshape systems, policies, and attitudes on a much larger scale. Advocacy is a journey of persistence and passion, and every step, no matter how small, brings us closer to a more inclusive and equitable world. As we conclude, I invite you to imagine a world where autistic people are not only accommodated, but truly celebrated and valued for who they are. Picture communities where differences are embraced, where autistic people can live, learn, and work in environments designed to support their strengths and honor their needs. Imagine schools where all children feel safe and empowered to thrive in their unique ways. Workplaces that see neurodiversity as a competitive advantage, and public spaces that welcome everyone, regardless of how they process or interact with the world. This vision is not a far-off dream. It is something we can all work towards starting today. Every small action we take fosters understanding, breaks down barriers, and advocates for inclusion, which brings us closer to creating these environments. It begins with conversations in our homes, advocacy in our schools and workplaces, and efforts to ensure community spaces are welcoming to all. It grows through the collective efforts of caregivers, allies, and autistic people working together to change exclusionary practices and build systems that collaborate and celebrate diversity. To make this vision a reality, I challenge each of you to commit to one specific change in your environment. Perhaps you can start by advocating for sensory-friendly practices in your child's school, discussing neurodiversity with your faith community, or creating a more flexible and supportive atmosphere in your workplace. It could be as simple as educating a friend or family member about the realities of autism, or listening to an autistic person share their perspective. These actions, no matter how small they may seem, have the potential to inspire broader change in your circles and beyond. I also encourage you to share what you've learned here today. Your insights and experiences are valuable, and sharing them with your networks can help amplify the message of inclusion. Whether it's through conversations, social media, or joining local advocacy efforts, your voice can help shift perceptions and pave the way for systemic change. By working together and spreading awareness, we can create communities that reflect the values of equity, empathy, and celebration of all individuals. As we leave today, I want to leave you with this thought. Inclusivity begins with understanding, grows through action, and flourishes when everyone is celebrated for who they are. Let this be the foundation of our work as caregivers, advocates, and allies. Together, we have the power to transform our communities and build a world where every autistic person feels valued, supported, and embraced. Thank you for being part of this journey and for committing to making a difference. I have provided some additional reading resources for you if you want to read more about these topics. I think that these slides will also go out to the attendees. So I just wanted to open it up to questions. I know I talked in kind of a general way about what some of these things look like, but I can also give you concrete examples. For example, when we talk about advocating for community gatherings to be, inclusive, Fish in a Tree works with Shrimp Fest to make Shrimp Fest the most accessible and inclusive festival in all of Louisiana. We provide quiet rooms, we provide sensory bins, we provide sensory kits for people to take with them throughout the festival. We have seating areas that are designated sensory friendly. We provide earplugs and fidget tools and other devices for people to use during their time at the festival. So those are changes that can be made, and that began just as me as a mother advocating for the ability to be able to take my children to a festival. There are so many festivals here in South Louisiana, and that's part of my cultural heritage as a Cajun. but they're hard for me to attend as an autistic person, and they're impossible for me to attend with my children who all have sensory sensitivities. And so these are the changes that can be made. This year, this coming year for Shrimp Fest, we're actually including a component, which is a presentation on how to make festivals inclusive and accessible for neurodivergent people. And we're inviting all of the festival makers from all over Louisiana, I think some from Mississippi and Alabama, to come and attend this symposium on accessibility and inclusion and festival making, and then to attend Shrimp Fest to see that work in action. So that is a big project of ours in 2025, that we will be working on. But that's an example of that ripple effect, just the idea of, oh, I wished this big part of my culture was accessible. And then going to the co-founders of a festival and saying this really needs to happen and getting them on board and writing a grant to fund that opportunity, and then implementing it and finding volunteers to staff it, and then now being able to invite other festival makers to see this in action and to implement it in their own festivals. That's part of that ripple effect that we were talking about. Like one person can make a difference, and a simple, thing like having a conversation can lead to bigger and bigger things. So, as a caregiver myself, but also as an autistic person myself, my whole life is advocacy. I mean, that's my job. I get paid to do it, but it's what I have to do for each of my kids. It seems like daily, with their schools and with all of their extracurricular activities and all the various things that they do, I'm constantly advocating for ways to make those things accessible for them because they're not. And so we can definitely kind of drill down into real world examples of these things if you're interested in that. But I want to open it up to questions, so I'll give that to Claire to moderate.
Since I know you can't read the chat, I wanted to just let you know that one of our participants said, "Thank you, Bridget. There's so many things you mentioned that our family can relate to." And then another participant said, "Would love to stay connected. Is there a website and are you on social media for your nonprofit and the festival symposium?"
Yes. So our website, and if you could put this in the chat, that would be great, Claire. The website is www.fishinatreenola.org. And our website is currently being having pages added to it. So check back for more later. But it features all of our programming. We have a lot of support groups. We have parent support groups. We have support groups for late identified and diagnosed autistic adults. We have a lot of programming specifically for adults. We do have some local programming for children. We do a sensory-friendly story time at the Children's Museum. We're taking a little break right now, but we should be starting back up soon. So all those programs, you can read about them on our website. As far as Shrimp Fest and the symposium, that information will come out later in the new year, and we'll put it up on the website. We do have Instagram. We're at Fish in a Tree. We have a Facebook page, but I don't really recommend it because it doesn't get updated very often. But you can follow all of our work on our website. And you can reach out to me directly if you want to send an email. My email address is Bridgette, BRIDGETTE @fishinatreenola.org. You can write to me directly, and Claire, if you need me to say that again so you can put it in the chat, I will.
No, I know your email because I email you a lot. And I
Cool.
will include this information in the wrap-up email I send out to everyone.
Great.
Do you just want me to link your Instagram and not the Facebook page?
Yeah, that'd be great. No one needs to go to the Facebook page. It's so old.
Perfect. I'll make a note of that for myself. Does anyone have any questions that you'd like to ask? Like she said, she's happy to entertain some like specific practical questions if you're interested. I'll give everybody a moment to think about what questions they might have.
I can just talk about some practical examples of all this stuff in action. My children like to go to the Children's Museum, but we can only go when it's about to close because it's very sensory overwhelming for them. And so I'm actually on the advisory board, the advisory committee for the Children's Museum, and I explain this to them. And now there are sensory friendly hours. I think it's every other Thursday from 4 to 6. You can look that up on their website. Um, but now they have sensory friendly hours where they dim the lights and they reduce the noise, and they only allow, I think it's 40 people in the museum at a time. And it's not crowded, and you kind of have the run of the place, and you can be loud and you can stim and no one will stop you. Um, and it's really great that they do that. And then also our new program, our sensory friendly story hour, we actually offer during those sensory friendly hours at the museum. So you can go explore the museum and then come to the story time, which offers a neuro-affirming story, which is presented by a neurodivergent theater or film actor locally here, and it's paired with a sensory friendly activity for the kids in attendance. And then oftentimes it's also there's a presentation for parents by an expert on different components of neurodiversity in youth. So it's a great program. Like I said, we're taking a little break. We're between grants, but we'll be starting up again soon. Um,
We do have a question in the chat. It was sent to me directly, just asking about extracurricular activities for middle schoolers. I don't know if you want to kind of like start. It's not every Thursday, anonymous questioner. The Children's Museum program that Bridget's mentioning is, I think it's every second and fourth Thursday.
oh,
The newsletter, it might be the first and third. Oh my gosh, I'm terrible. It's every other, but it's on specific like a first and third or second and fourth. The flyer is in our newsletter. And you can also find it on their website. You do have to register ahead on their website.
you can also just show up and then write your name down on the entry thing.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know about that because all their promotional materials say
And
that you have
they've
to
just
sign up
partnered
ahead.
with Culture City to provide weighted vests for children and also sensory kits that can be used during their time at the museum. So they're working to get certified at being a sensory friendly space from Culture City. So they are doing a lot in that space currently, which is great. And I'm on the advisory board. Tree works with them as well. I've done training for their staff on how to take care of neurodivergent patrons, families, and children.
One of our room participants did mention on the subject of like extracurricular kind of sensory inclusive activities. The Chuck E. Cheese does have a sensory day. You said Saturday or Sunday? Every first Sunday of the month. They're open 2 hours early.
Oh,
Another one that I know about is the National World War II Museum does a sensory friendly morning on the fourth Saturday of every month. You do need to register ahead for that one. You get in for free as long as you come between 8 and 9, and you can stay as long as you like. The first hour that they're open, the breezeway that takes you to the other half of the museum is not open, but once they open at their regular time, they open that up and you've kind of gotten a head start on the other attendees. And the person who asked about extracurricular activities did also ask about other sensory places. So Bridget, if you know some others that I'm not remembering, feel free to share them.
Off the top of my head, I don't know of others. Tree does not offer extracurriculars for middle schoolers at this time. Um, but during the summer, Le Petit Theater offers some theater programming for different age groups that's very good. And it's not intentionally, on purpose meant to be sensory friendly, but it is very sensory friendly. And I would recommend it if you have a neurodivergent teen or young person. They have great, really inclusive programming as well that they usually have on Loyola campus, which is nice.
I have a Zoom participant who's raised their hand. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, Sherelle, feel free.
Hello. I was just gonna add to the list of sensory places. The AMC Theater has sensory friendly days where like the lights are brighter, the music is down. And it says it's on the second and fourth Saturday and Wednesday evening. So that's on their website. It's just called Sensory Friendly Film Showings.
That's great. And I know the Broadside also offers movies with closed captioning on certain days as well.
And oh my gosh, it just disappeared from my brain. Oh, the Louisiana State Museum periodically does events. And theirs are actually pretty cool. They have like hands-on activities that they do as part of their sensory events. They usually have one for younger ages and one aimed at teens and adults, where the activities are slightly different for the two age groups. I don't know that those necessarily happen on a regular schedule, but when they send me the flyers, I do put them in our newsletter.
Yeah, Fish in a Tree does have some programming itself for young people and for youth, but um, not an extensive array of programming. Most of our programming is for adults. Um, so we don't have that much for kids, but the stuff we do have is great. It's not all the time.
I have a question just for you, Bridget, I think is,
Sure.
related to the season. I would love to hear your thoughts on helping families navigate going to holiday gatherings, potentially with family members who maybe refuse to talk about their child's autism diagnosis or are uncomfortable considering that they might need to do things differently, and just ways to like open that conversation with them and try to get them on board with being more inclusive and modifying things. So I think that's a big issue that a lot of people run into at this time of year.
The parents don't want to accept the diagnosis of child.
No, so like I know that this comes up in our helpline a lot where like the caregiver, they're really dedicated to modifying things and accommodating their child, but they have a parent, like so like the grandparents or an aunt or an uncle who like refuse to even consider that the child has a disability at all and like is not comfortable talking about it, like how to
Yeah,
start opening that conversation with them.
yeah. So honestly, that comes a lot in my daily advocacy as well. I personally am kind of a poor example of that. My parents are like that, and I just ended my relationship with them. So that I'm not a very good example. But there are things that you can do without even having to mention a diagnosis or put that idea forth at all. Like you can say, "Oh, Tommy is sensitive to lights. Let's turn the lights down. Like you don't have to say, oh, Tommy's autistic and part of his autism is that he has sensory sensitivities and you don't have to go into it. You can just say, oh, Tommy has a sensitive stomach and he only eats these foods. Or Tommy has you know what I mean? Like you don't have to keep saying that the situation is that your child is autistic. Because everybody understands that people have preferences and differences, I think, to some extent. But you don't have to frame it as it is autism unless it's very important for them to acknowledge that this is autism. Or if you're just trying to get through your stay with them, you can say, this is what we do at home. This is our routine. This is our, you don't have to spell it out like, you know, you must accept the fact that my child is autistic if that's not important to you, if you're just trying to get through it. I actually my so I have a blended family. My husband and I are both each other's second marriage, and we have three children between us, but they're not our children together. I have a daughter with my ex-husband, and he has two daughters with his ex-wife. And their mother, who his ex-wife does not accept an autism diagnosis. And so we even do that with her. We no longer try to explain to her that clearly the child is autistic. We just say, what we found at our house is that this really works for bedtime. And then she tries it and she goes, oh, it does work. And we don't feel the need to have to explain why it works or the fact, you know what I mean? Because she's like, she has really hard time going to bed. And it's like, yes, and we know why, and we can explain it to you. Or we can just tell you what we find at home works, and that if you try it, you will find that it also works. And it's not necessary that we have to explain that this has anything to do with autism.
That's a really good point that I hadn't thought of before. So I'm glad I asked that question. Really good point about just expressing specific support needs rather than like putting it in the diagnosis framework for those family members that are.
You just don't have to. I mean, unless it's very important for them to say the words and accept the fact that they are autistic. I mean, why even go there? And that's something we had to learn, because I was very much like we need to teach our daughter, how to self-advocate and how to understand herself and that it's a beautiful thing. And then I had to kind of let go of that a little bit because it really made the mom upset that we were teaching her, about autism. And so then we just had to teach her those things without identifying it. And then it became a much more workable relationship with the mom. Um, and that's how we ended up doing it. And so now she does the things that we do to take care of her daughter, but she doesn't, when we mention autism, she just says, I don't see it. So
All right. Let me see. Let me give people another chance to kind of think about if they have other questions that they want to express. You guys have been kind of quiet today, a little tired, cold. I'm cold. Oh, I can't hear you. Just a second. I No, you go for it.
Hi, I wanted to know if you can give some advice on what do you think are some of the best ways if you are interested in maybe starting an organization for kids with autism. I'm pretty sure you have been through a lot of different scenarios with starting a fish in a tree and things like that. Do you have any advice for people that may want to start their own organization or anything, or some like little pitfalls to avoid?
oh goodness, that's like a master class. That could be a whole other, 6-hour presentation. Um, it really depends on what part of that you want to focus on. Is it Is it starting a business, a for-profit business that offers support for a cost? Is it starting a nonprofit that pursues grant funds to fund programming for children? There's so many components. You have to write the business plan, you have to apply for the 501(c)(3) status, you have to find volunteers in the beginning who will help you realize, what you're trying to do without any overhead, unless you have some investment capital to throw into the project. And those are all like whole classes that you could take on how to do those things. I would suggest, if you are going to, let's say, start a nonprofit that's going to seek funding for programming, I would definitely advise you to research appropriate grants and find out where the potential funds are going to come from, and make a calendar for yourself of when those grant applications are due, so that you have at least a year out, what you're going to be applying for, and you're going to plan for that. I would definitely try to identify people who would be your major donors, who would support your project with larger single-time donations. You need to assemble a board, so you'll need to find people with expertise on finances and communications and probably social media strategy and fundraising. So it's not for the sleight of heart, it takes a team of people, and it takes everyone to believe in a singular vision, and you have to really narrow what that vision is. You can't be all things to all people. You have to have a specific mission and a specific goal that guides everything that you do. But I would do the research on funding first, because if there's no funding available for what you're trying to do, then you're not going to be as, successful at doing it. You have to identify where those funds are going to come from, and if you meet the requirements to receive those funds. Yeah, and then you have to get the word out somehow to organize enough people to sustain your organization. You have to get the word out so people know where to find you and how to access your services. You have to decide if you're going to offer your services virtually or in person. And if it's in person, where's that going to be housed, and how are you going to pay for that housing and like building, and utilities and insurance and all that. I mean, it all takes money, and you have to figure out where the money's going to come from. And most grants don't pay for things like that. They only pay for programming for the most part. So it's a big undertaking. It's not, something you can do in an afternoon all by yourself. It's going to take a team of committed people. Most businesses, for-profit businesses, don't turn a profit at all until their second or third year. So you also have to have enough personal financing to get yourself through 2 or 3 years before you even see profits. For a nonprofit, it's even longer than that, because you're just being paid through grant funding, and you don't have a predictable income. You don't have a regular paycheck. So it's a lot of planning, and it actually costs a lot of money to do that. So you have to be prepared for that. I could talk about this for days. So I don't know how to end my end
I
my answer to your question.
I can
Um,
help you out with like transitioning so you can take a little breather from all that talking. This is actually something that I've been thinking about a lot. As somebody who is working for a nonprofit in the area, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations in the New Orleans area that have overlapping or similar missions. And if your goal in creating an organization is to create specific programming to expand a specific opportunity You're not necessarily really trying to have to do all that back end that Bridget is talking about. You're just wanting there to be more of a specific type of program. You have an idea for an activity. If that's the kind of thing you're wanting to do, it makes a little more sense for committed people like you to look at the existing nonprofits in the area and say, this organization's mission aligns with the thing that I'm wanting to create. And then you figure out, how do you get involved with that organization? Do you already have a program and you're looking for somebody to house it and be like a fiscal sponsor that does the grant applications and like the money runs through the nonprofit and then supports your program? Or are you, wanting to be a more ongoing participant in that in an organization's running and you apply to be a board member? There's a lot of nonprofits and a lot of them do have overlapping missions. And so, like Bridget's is very unique because she's serving not just autistic people, but the whole neurodiversity community. And then, they have a lot of adult programming, which before they started was a huge area of lack in the city. But truthfully, there are a lot of organizations in the city that support youth, in general. And there's a fair number of organizations that support disabled youth in general. And so it's a lot easier and would strengthen us generally if people who are really excited about creating more support work through the existing organizations to do that, because now you're not having to create your own nonprofit. You're not having to maintain all these insurances, create a website, have your own board. There's a lot of back end work that Bridget is very familiar with.
It's a lot. And a lot of it is not helping people. It's just sustaining yourself. But like if I got an email from somebody and said, "Hey, I am a really reliable and committed person and I have this idea for this program. Can I talk to you about it? About hosting it with Fish and a Tree?" I would absolutely answer that email.
Us too. When people come to me and they're like, "Hey, I want to do this thing. Can you partner with us?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And sometimes the answer is, "I'd love to partner with you, but right now we need a lot more funding than either of us has to do the thing you want to do. How can we get that? How can we work together to get that?" Because the more that a lot of the big funders now, they really, especially grant funders, they want people to be working in coalitions. They don't want to be getting applications from 10 individual nonprofits all running similar programs. They want the organizations to be working together and applying for larger amounts of funds to sustain larger programs that are run across organizations. And so the more we can all start to collaborate with each other, the easier it starts to become to pull in that funding to say, we have these people and these programs and all of this support behind us and all of this need, you know, we need the funding so we can do this thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, let somebody else take care of all the other stuff that's not running the program. Don't try to take all that on for no reason.
Yeah, the boring back end is not the fun part of of running a nonprofit. Definitely not. All right, let's see. What time is it? So it's about 2:38. If nobody else has any questions and Bridget is not against it, I'm fine with us wrapping up early. But I don't want people to feel rushed either. So feel free to take a moment and consider if you have anything else you want to share, Bridget, or if anyone has any questions.
I feel like I've been talking forever. I don't know what else to share, honestly.
Totally fair. Totally fair. Uh, it has been a lot of talking. Uh, 2 hours is a long time, but it's also a little better because we don't have to like wrap up all of a sudden at an hour when everyone still has things to think about and
Yeah,
share.
no, it's great. It's great. Whenever I'm doing keynote addresses, it's always like, oh, the time limit. And then you get to the part in your speech where you're being inspirational and they're like telling you to wrap it up and you're like, but I'm getting to I'm getting to the best part.
All right. I totally feel that. It gets me too. Let's see. We got a thank you in the chat, wishing us a great weekend. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bridget, for being with us. I guess I should stand where people can see me. I'm working on two computers at the same time, and the one that is hosting the meeting is not the one that I use to have the camera on me. So sorry about that, everybody. Thank you so much, Bridget, for being here. Really appreciate you taking time to prepare the presentation and deliver to us. I think that had a lot of really useful information for everybody. I will send out a wrap up afterwards to everyone that'll include Bridget's presentation, her contact information and links, some links for other organizations in the area. And just things to support the topics of the discussion in this presentation. It will also include all of the wrap-up information from the previous 5 seminars, so you don't have to go email diving to find all of the previous reference materials. So it will be kind of a lengthy email, but I want to make sure that everybody has everything in one place. So thank you again for being here, and I hope everybody has a great weekend.
Thanks, Claire.